So, Joyce and Carlos Takam have weighed in for their showdown tomorrow night. Joyce weighed in at 263 pounds or 18 stone 11, whereas Takam weighed in at 248 pounds or 17 stone 10. Both guys pretty much within their normal range, and they both looked healthy and strong on the scales, which is to be expected from these two because they do have reputations as being professionals, and unnecessary weight, bad conditioning is rarely a problem with these two men. I made an initial reaction to this video about 5 weeks ago when it was first formally announced, and in that video I gave an early prediction that Joyce would probably stop Takam in round 10. So for those of you who want the short version of this video, I'm sticking with that prediction, but I'm going to make an effort to explore this fight in a bit more depth and analyze how I think it will go. Despite that being my prediction, I do think that this is going to be a tricky fight for Joyce while it lasts. I can see Takam having success if he employs similar tactics to the Joshua fight, where he's utilizing lateral movement and kind of coming in intermittently to land 1, 2, 3 punches maybe, but clean ones that are set up well, and then back on the move again to unsettle his opponent. I think he should try and punch in between Joyce. Joyce isn't the quickest heavyweight. That's one of the main criticisms leveraged against him. So it is doable. It can be done. Bryant Jennings had a decent amount of success fighting that way. And I think that Takam can replicate that. Despite 3 of his 5 defeats coming by way of stoppage, Takam has displayed a good chin, as he's pretty much only been stopped late in fights. There was the Povetkin loss, which was in the 10th round, the Chisora loss, which came in the 8th round, and the Joshua loss that came, I think, in the 11th. But the Joshua loss, it's not... I mean, he was losing the fight, but the stoppage for me was a little bit iffy. Not to say that Takam was going to win, but I think the referee did stop it early. So that's kind of there's an asterisk next to that one. I think the main issue though for Takam is that he probably lacks the firepower to hurt Joyce and deter him. Many people may disagree with me with the notion that Takam can't hurt Joyce, and they bring up the Jennings fight and how Jennings actually hurt Joyce in the first round of that fight with a body shot. And that's a valid point. It was a great shot, and Joyce was clearly hurt. But even though Jennings was able to do that early in the fight as well, he still went on to be outpointed and kind of overwhelmed by Joyce in some spots of that fight. Not being able to deter Joyce, I think, will prove to be problematic for Takam, because Joyce is notorious for his engine, his punch output, and his just general relentlessness. People are often confused as to how Joyce lands so often on his opponents despite being so much slower than them on average. In my opinion, from what I've seen of Joyce, the answer is really quite simple, and it's because he actually knows how to set up his shots. And for my money, Joyce's IQ is by far his most underrated strength. And it's quite strange because a lot of people actually dismiss the notion that Joyce even has any boxing IQ at all, pretty much reducing him to just some big lumbering puncher. But I'd implore these people to actually analyse Joyce, because when you do, you see that he's actually a very good and accomplished boxer. You can see he's constantly taking his head off the centre line left and right, and as I've waxed lyrical about in many videos, that not only makes you a harder target to hit because you're now moving, but it changes the dynamics of your positioning relative to your opponents. So when Joyce goes over to the front foot, he's now able to jab with the right hand. When he goes to the back foot, he can now jab with the left hand. And that's what he does. He's constantly changing the side of the line that his head is on, and he mixes in various jabs from both hands, and then from there he feints, and depending on which hand he leads with, he can open up or potentially set up another shot from there. and he has a wide array of punches. We've seen him throw body shots, hooks and uppercuts, upstairs, downstairs, straight shots, and he does that with a good degree of head movement and also foot movement. I think that's another underrated aspect of his game is, even though he's a massive man, he's 6'6", 260 plus pounds, he can move very well with good balance, and he's able to really weave in his movement and his defense with his offense, makes him very dangerous. So yeah, Joyce is an absolute unit of a man, and when he gets into his rhythm, he's perpetual motion sometimes. And not just Joyce, but fighters who are able to do this, your Lomachenkos, your Usyks, your Joyces, and so on, they have this perpetual motion, and this constantly keeps the opponent guessing. And if the opponent's unable to keep up with their own positional changes, they basically get hit upside the head with some massive clubbing shots, especially from Joyce. And I think once Joyce gets into this state, I can see Takam becoming a bit of a sitting duck. And I think from there, Joyce should be able to string together those vicious combos that we've seen. And he doesn't seem to let up once he gets going. So overall, I anticipate that Takam will probably take the first 3 rounds, probably convincingly. He might get a bit closer, but I think those first 3 rounds are going to be Takam's. And because that's going to be when he's at his sharpest. And I think Joyce might be trailing a little bit as he's trying to get into his rhythm and engage the reaction of Takam to certain positions, certain changes, certain attacks. Takam will probably be able to bob and weave under Joyce's shots. I think Takam's only about 6'1", so there is a quite clear height difference, and he'd probably be able to use that to his advantage. Takam's of course no stranger to fighting taller men. I think if he gets close enough, he might try and rough Joyce up. But after that, I can see Joyce probably becoming a bit more mobile and starting to loosen up, and probably set up and land some big shots on Takam. If Takam has the energy, he may rely on his lateral movement, but I think Joyce would close him down in an attempt to probably trap him on the ropes. And I can see the pace of the fight and the wrestling and the relentless shots of Joyce get into Takam. I believe Takam's toughness will serve him well, but probably only until the 10th round, where I can see the referee having to save Takam from himself and really being forced to jump in and save Takam after a bit of a battering. Don't get me wrong, I can see this going to points, because Takam, he is a veteran at this stage. He's been in with some very good guys. He's tough, he's well conditioned, but for my money, I think Joyce is just a little bit too dynamic. Yeah, he's slow and he's a little bit pondering, but or lumbering rather. But he once he gets into that groove, I think he's a lot harder to hit than people realize, and also people, they downplay his boxing IQ and his technique. And I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to stay with a 10th round stoppage for Joyce. The referee has to jump in. Probably, I think Takam gets stopped on his feet. So that's how I see the fight going. It is I guess you could say, an eliminator of sorts for the WBO, because the winner will probably be well, I think Joyce right now is recognised as being the WBO mandatory challenger. Whoever wins this fight, if Joyce wins, he maintains that status. If Takam wins, he will inherit that. And both guys, I think, will be gunning for the winner of AJ versus Usyk. And there's actually a lot of history between those 4 guys, because, of course, AJ and Joyce have had extensive sparring together because they were on the GB team together for years. So they're very familiar with each other. Joyce also has history with Usyk, because he fought him in the WSB, which is like a semi-pro league for those of you who don't know. Takam also fought AJ back in 2017, gave a good account of himself in that fight. And also, if I remember correctly, Takam was also supposed to fight Usyk in May 2019. I believe it was May 2019. I'm pretty sure. So all these guys, they are relatively familiar with each other, and I think it makes for a nice little saga, because maybe the loser of the respective fights could fight each other and the winners fight each other. I think that's an interesting development, and these are good fights anyway. People don't seem to be particularly keen on fighting Joyce. He doesn't have the greatest amount of fanfare, and to add insult to injury, he's a hard guy to beat, and I think he's going to give a lot of heavyweights a lot of problems. But nevertheless, Carlos Takam has stepped up, so credit to him. But as I say, I see him getting stopped in the 10th. That is my take on this fight. If you want to discuss it in the comment section below, go ahead. Get back to you and we'll have a good old chinwag about this fight. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.